Hi everybody, here's my author presentation on George Saunders. Since we're going to be reading three of his short stories, I thought it'd be helpful to know a little bit more about his life and his work. So George Saunders started traveling around the world working as a geological engineer. And so you'll see sort of that worldly global perspective in a lot of his stories. He's been writing short stories for 20 years, and he's currently a professor of creative writing at the Syracuse MFA program. He's mentored a few famous writers like Cheryl Strayed, who wrote Wild, and other people like that. He was awarded a Guggenheim Fellowship and a MacArthur Fellowship in 2006. And in 2009, he received an Academy Award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters. When he was asked why the short story form, because that's what he predominantly writes, he said, "Well, a kind of dumb answer is I just find it so beautiful, and I've not figured it out yet. I started maybe in my middle 20s trying a crack at it, and it's just a deep, deep well, you know? So when you get it right, it can be such a beautiful explosion of submerged meaning." His writing style is characterized by a combination of the absurd or fantastic with the mundane realities of life. A lot of his inspiration comes from dreams, and you'll see his stories are pretty weird, deeply weird. A lot of his work includes a political message, but he tries not to make it overly didactic, or he tries not to make his stories seem like propaganda. So if you look at this image right here, this is an image that illustrates one of the stories we're going to be reading. And he described having a dream where he woke up and saw sort of like a fishing line running through the heads of a few women dangling above ground, which is obviously a really weird, freaky dream. And this is what he said. He said, "I woke up from that dream and it had some obvious, kind of political, metaphorical implications. And so then the trick for the next 12 years was to kind of preserve the intensity of that first thing without having it just merely be a kind of propagandistic preaching job." So, using these kind of absurd images to make a political statement while still without necessarily making it propaganda, as he said. I'm going to show you a video of him talking about the writing process that I found really helpful.
I think that a good story is, and sometimes it's just the tiniest kernel of something that you enjoyed writing. Then, once you put it down on the page and write it and rewrite it, it's actually your own discontent with it that in some slow, mysterious way urges it to that higher ground. And often it'll do so in ways that surprise you. So, for example, if you said, Frank was an asshole. All right, well, that's got a little bite to it, but it's not, not great writing. But then, so the writer of mine always says, "How so? Frank is an asshole." Okay, how so? Frank is an asshole because he snapped at the barista. Okay, that's you're making your case. That's good. Why do you think he did that? Frank is an asshole, and then I start to do that. I think that the asshole is in the way. Let's take that out. Let's just go to action. Let's say Frank snapped at the barista who reminded him of his wife, his dead wife. Frank snapped at the barista who reminded him of his dead wife, who he dearly loved. Now suddenly you're into a whole different world, from Frank as an asshole to Frank as a guy who has the capacity for real love, and when it was denied him, it broke him, And that wasn't done because I said, I want to write a compassionate story about a widower. It was done because the sentences were bothering me, And I think when you pay attention to those sentences, your better nature rises up. And so with Frank, I'm coming back a second, third, and fourth time and looking at him. Frank, do you have anything, kind of saying, is there anything about you, Frank, that I'm not noticing? Can you tell me something more about yourself that would make me love you better? And the sentence says, yes, there is. storytelling, at least from my experience of it, I think it's a stand-in for day-to-day life. So when you come to a story with this attitude we've been talking about, which is kind of hopeful, generous, but not too pushy, it's like, well, what are you? I don't know. You know, when you try to leave your ideas about the story at the door. Those things are so much like what you do with the person in your life that you love. You know, you come back to them again and again and try to intuit their real expansiveness, and you try to keep them close to you. You try to give them the benefit of the doubt. So in that sense, it is, you know, you could see revision as a sort of a form of active love. It's actually love in progress, I guess. As I've gotten older, my view of the world has shifted a little bit. I find life so beautiful and also so hard to pin down, you know. And for me, the process of sitting down to write a story is to keep your eyes open all the time, to keep yourself mystified, and to say, this thing defies systemization. It really does. Every story is different. You arrive at it with your tools from the last story, and it says, no. We are all seeing through that. Don't pull out those old tricks on me. You go out in the world, see what it is. It's just as fresh now as it was when you were 18. Go out there and experience it. Come back in befuddled, and then try. You know, I don't care how old you are. Do something beautiful.
So I thought that was really lovely, thinking about storytelling as an act of love. So the stories we're going to be reading come from this collection called 10th of December. If you're interested in some of his other works, he's also written Lincoln in the Bardo, which is a novel, critically acclaimed, and Civil War Land. When I was preparing this, I also came across a letter that George Saunders wrote to his students on writing during the pandemic, and I thought it was timely. So he writes, "Geez, what a hard and depressing and scary time. So much suffering and anxiety everywhere. I saw this bee happily buzzing around a flower yesterday and felt like, moron, if only you knew. But it also occurs to me that this is when the world needs our eyes and ears and minds. This has never happened before here, at least not since 1918. We are, and especially you are, the generation that is going to have to help us make sense of this and recover afterward. What new forms might you invent to fictionalize an event like this, where all of the drama is happening in private, essentially? Are you keeping records of the emails and texts you're receiving, the thoughts you're having, the way your hearts and minds are reacting to this strange new way of living? It's all important. 50 years from now, people the age you are now won't believe this ever happened, or will do the sort of eye roll we all do when someone tells us something about some crazy thing that happened in 1970. What will convince that future kid is what you are able to write about this, and what you're able to write about it will depend on how much sharp attention you are paying now, and what records you keep. Also, I think, with how open you can keep your heart, I'm trying to practice feeling something like, so this is happening now, or, so this too is part of life on Earth. Did not know that, universe. Thanks so much, stinker. I guess what I'm trying to say is that the world is like a sleeping tiger, and we tend to live our lives there on its back. We're much smaller than the tiger, obviously. We're like Barbies and Kens on the back of a tiger. And now and then that tiger wakes up, and that is terrifying. Sometimes it wakes up and someone we love dies, or someone breaks our heart, or there's a pandemic. But this is far from the first time that tiger has come awake. She has been doing it since the beginning of time and will never stop doing it. And always there have been writers to observe it and later make some sort of sense of it, or at least bear witness to it. It's good for the world for a writer to bear witness, and it's good for the writer too, especially if she can bear witness with love and humor, and despite it all, some fondness for the world, just as it is manifesting, warts and all. All of this is to say, there's still work to be done, and now more than ever. I just thought I'd share that with you. And here are my gorgeous MLA citations. All right, so enjoy reading George Saunders. That's it. Bye.